All right, I seem to have solved that problem. I got my live chat up and running. So as you come in, say hello so I know who's here. I am back, Father. Who's that? All right. Well, we're gonna get started in just a minute. I was just talking some basic things. Yeah, I'm the guinea pig today. Like I said, we have our friend Harold looking over us today, keeping us safe, and we're going to do the best I can. I'm going to do the best I can. I don't know about anybody else. This is awkward, not seeing faces in front of me, and so we're going to do the best we can. It's at about less than a minute. And hey, Cheese Stick. Obviously, if you have hand sanitizer, use it. Hand sanitizer is actually a substitute for soap and water. You use it when you don't have soap and water. Soap and water is actually the best. Why do we say 20 minutes? When I taught my kids how to wash their hands, it was you sing the ABCs, maybe twice. The soap needs that long of a period of time before it actually works effectively. That's why there's a 20-second rule on that. Mr. Fosnight's with us. That must be Alex. Glad to see a couple of you anyways. I'm figuring maybe we should start doing these later in the day. I don't know if you guys are up. So by how much you sleep in class, that might be true. A couple resources that I want you guys to think about. Quizlet, Mr. Fosnight especially has worked hard to have a bunch of sets on Quizlet for you guys to use for vocabulary words to study. I know in my classroom, I have not used Google Classroom at all. Obviously, in this situation, we're going to start using it quite a bit. And so Google Classroom is up and running. We will be loading some materials on it very, very shortly. The packets that the 8th graders were sent home with, if you did come and get a packet, it is mainly about studying for the state exam. So it really encompasses everything you've learned from kindergarten up to 8th grade. So there's a lot of stuff in there. Use online resources, use your phones, laptops if you had them. You don't need to take that test blind. You can learn as you go. You use it to, if you don't understand a question, look it up, look up the answer. A lot of it will be review for you, but don't be afraid of that. The one thing that we're going to spend time with in the next couple of weeks with the 8th graders will be a unit that we were hoping to have gotten started on forces in motion. And we'll be talking about that in a minute. 7th graders, this is a time of year where we start talking about plants and trees. You guys finished your biome projects. By the way, there are a number of students who never shared their biome projects with either Mr. Suriani or Mr. Fosnight. If you didn't, you need to, because you need to get a grade in the grade book. Don't forget to do that. There are some zeros in there, and they're going to stay zeros until you fix it. So please don't forget to do that. You've done a lot of hard work on that. But along with biomes, the 7th graders, we're going to be talking about plants, trees, how that fits into the environment, and up to us planting a garden. And obviously that remains to be seen. Hopefully after a month or so of this, we can actually do this. When you come back to 8th grade, you get to enjoy the fruits of your labor, like the kids did in the beginning of this year. All right. First of all, if any of you have looked at any of your packets and have any questions at all, don't hesitate to ask. That's why I wanted this live chat on. Otherwise, I'm just talking to myself. I am talking to myself. So let's get started. Oh, 6th graders. Forgot about 6th graders. Right now for this week, the focus is going to be on 8th and 7th graders. 6th graders, you guys have a book project that you're working on. You've gotten a book, and you basically need to write a report / outline on the contents of the book. You will be able to turn that in using Google Classroom. I'll have a template set up for you, and you should be able to upload something. We'll have other options available as soon as we can. We're all scrambling to make this work, and so patience is important. If you're just joining us, make sure that I see my numbers going up a little bit. Make sure you say hello in the live chat so I know who's in here. And we're going to get started with some 8th grade stuff. And I feel like I'm working the stock market because I've got multiple screens set up in front of me so we can do some things. So, and I have some materials in front of me to look at. So I'm sorry that my head's on a swivel. The first thing we're going to talk about is when we're talking about forces and forces in motion, what actually is a force. If anybody has an idea of what a force is, Star Wars excluded, you can just type it in that live chat. The other thing we're going to talk about is friction. Many of us understand friction certainly to a limited amount. We know if we rub our hands together, what happens. We know that that's friction. We know that our hands start to get warm. But do we really understand other applications in our everyday life? So friction especially has a lot of everyday life applications that we can look at. So I don't have any responses yet, but if anybody has any understanding of what a force or friction are or examples that they can give, please go ahead and share them. We also, part of that is gravity, and gravity is actually a force. A lot of these are forces a lot of the forces that we talk about are things that we don't physically see, but we know that they're there. We can observe them, but we don't know that they're there. Magnetism is a force. Gravity is a force. We know that if we take a ball and let go of it, it's going to fall to the earth. In reality, it's actually being pulled to the earth instead of falling to the earth. All objects, even atoms, even a ball like this has a certain amount of friction to it. I have some videos that I'll be posting are good examples of this. If any of you have been Boy Scouts or seen Boy Scout stuff, you know, when we take two sticks and rub them together, we can actually start a fire. Not that easy to do, but it's doable. And I think you get a badge for that. I don't know. I never made it that far in Boy Scouts. Yep, somebody posted a force that slows objects down when they rub against each other is friction. That's a partially correct answer because, yeah, friction can really slow us down. The tires on our car, the brakes on our car, if you can imagine a round disc, when you apply your brakes, they are basically squeezing against that disc, causing friction, causing your car to slow down. I'm having fun reading some of these. Roblox Gaming Studios. If I don't know who you are, put your name up there for me, just so I know who we're dealing with. And thanks for joining us. We are talking about friction right now. This is mainly for the 8th graders. Not only will friction slow things down, but it'll give us, let's see another answer. A force is something that can move and not stop until something stops it. Well, you're pretty close. That's partially inclusive. Yeah, I think that's Hunter too. Yeah. All right. A force is anything that can cause a change in motion of an object. Okay, so a force. Now, I'm sorry about this. My hand is actually a force that right now is stopping this object from moving. It's stopping it from hitting the ground, but it also can be a force that causes something to move. By tossing it, I am causing it to move. Magnets can be a force. If anybody used magnets, I'll have them for you for an example. Magnets, what happens to magnets? They can either pull together, or they can, if you turn them around, they can be a force of repulsion and actually pull away from each other. So can you see that force? It's actually invisible. And so it's pretty cool that a lot of these forces that we're talking about, this is all physics. Yeah, that happen. And somebody just posted something, a push or a pull. Absolutely. We talk about that a lot. The other thing that a force being a push or a pull, it's either going to push something away like magnets, or pulling towards you like magnets can also, or gravity. 7th graders, you have some packets on plants, and yeah, you guys are supposed to be doing that. And I'll talk a little bit later in the broadcast about that. Let me get back on track. One of the other things we talk about, one of my favorite jokes that I get to tell everybody is about what inertia is. Inertia is the resistance of any object to change whatever its state of motion is. So if this ball is just sitting here, not doing anything, it's presently inert. Inertia is motion. So this ball could be heading in this direction, up at a 45-degree angle. It's going to keep going in that direction unless something else acts upon it. So if I throw a ball up into the air, what are some of the things that might actually act upon that to keep it from changing directions? My joke is that inertia is the resistance of an object to change its direction, that my old dog, I used to call my dog Inertia, because all it wanted to do was sit on the couch and do nothing. All right, so corny joke. Is that a dad joke? The inertia is when something is in a state of motion, it doesn't want to change, or a lack of state of motion. It could be moving or not moving. So yeah, gravity can act on something, right? If I throw something in the air, gravity is going to pull it back to the earth. What else is acting on it at the same time? What's going to slow it down? So there's other things that can slow it down, and there's a big idea of fluid resistance, okay? And so one of the big misconceptions is we think of the word fluid, we only think of liquids, but fluid can actually mean the air that surrounds us also. Mr. Fosnight has posted the 8th grade Quizlet on Google Classroom, and it's on, I believe it's called Forces in Motion. 2017. It's something that we've used for a couple years. It has a whole bunch of vocabulary words in there. So eighth graders, while I do want you to concentrate on your review packet, you can also get on there and start looking at some of the vocabulary. We'll have a lot of stuff loaded up for you this week in Google Classroom. And thank you for being patient. I know there's not a lot of people online right now, and hopefully with communication, we will get a little better at this and have more participation. Try to read some of these comments while I'm talking, and sometimes it makes me lose my train of thought. One of the things about friction, let's go back to talking about friction, is points of contact. So for example, if I had, let's say I had 4 fingers, and I have something rubbing across this. Let's say that those were sticks. It doesn't have to be fingers. And I have something rubbing across this. I actually have 4 different points of contact there. If I only had 1 point of contact, instead of 4 points of contact, there would be considerably less resistance with just that 1 point of contact. So understand that part of resistance is how many points of contact there is. So if I had a surface that was smooth versus a surface that was rough and had multiple points of contact, they would react differently depending on the points of contact. Anybody ever paid attention while their parents are driving down the road, or while you're driving down the road? You'll notice difference in sounds as the tires of the car goes across different surfaces. Some roads are super smooth. Those roads would have less friction. I've seen some concrete roads. You'd actually see a sign that says the state is testing this section of road, where they've grooved the pavement. They've grooved it either parallel to traffic or perpendicular to traffic, and they're testing to see how the road holds up and if there's any difference in the amount of friction that occurs there. Last thing you want when you're in a car is for you to slide off the road or not be able to stop. I experienced that, not with me, but I was getting ready to turn left and somebody had a red light in front of me and I had an arrow, and they were coming down a hill. It had just rained, and they put on the brakes and they just slid and slid and slid to the point where they were just a few feet away from my car, and you could actually see how they had no tread on their tires. And so they lost a substantial amount of their friction that they had originally had with a good set of tires. So they actually put themselves at risk by doing that. And I know tires are expensive, but I can imagine that person said, yeah, it's time for me to get tires. I just almost got in an accident. And so if I hadn't been paying attention, I would have turned in front of them and ended up getting hit by them. So friction does play a part in our everyday lives, even when we're walking. As we're walking, our foot, friction helps us walk. This is mostly for 8th graders, so don't panic if you're just tuning in. Right now, this is mostly for 8th graders. We'll be talking, doing some 7th grade stuff in a minute. I am looking at my phone while we're doing this too, because I'm getting some text. And if you're in sixth grade, remember you're working on your report. Seventh grade, you got a couple packets. We are talking about plants and animals, which is a continuation of your biomes that you just did a report on. Make sure that you've shared your biome project with me, because some students hadn't, and so far they don't have a grade in there for that. All right, getting back to what we were talking about with friction and tires, even when we're walking, we need to have friction. A lot of us, we had fun going down to Lock 3 for the holidays. We got to skate, we got to ice skate. Obviously, ice is we all know that ice is a situation where we have very, very little friction. And so that's an example of where there is very little friction, and skates actually would give us that friction. Driving in that's why we cancel school when we have bad weather, because obviously we can't drive. All right, so for the moment, if we don't have any other questions on the 8th grade stuff, I will talk about a few more things. We're gonna kind of front load you. So when you're standing on something, and you could be standing on an incline, on a hill, or anything, when you are standing there, that is actually called static friction. We think of static electricity if we rub ourselves and poke our little brother or sister and give them a shock and then run away because they're going to swat us. That's static electricity. But static friction is basically when you are not moving, when an object is not moving. Anytime an object is not moving, it has static friction that's causing it not to move. It could be a box on the ground, bicycle on a hill. Obviously, it would start rolling. But static friction, if we're standing on a hill with our feet, that friction and the fact that we're not moving, that's called static friction. Rolling friction is a little bit different when object moves over a surface, cars, bikes, anything you can think of. An assembly line, when they package items. When I was much younger, I worked in a factory, and the box would come down, and bottles of soap would go in a box, and it would soar down this line on rollers, just designed for it to get to the end of the line, so the box could be taped and put in the right pile depending on what product it was, and sent out to stores. This is going on right now all over the world in factories. People are manufacturing stuff. So there's so many really cool applications. 8th graders, I want you to think about this. I want you to come up with 10 examples of where you use friction in your everyday life. And before the end of the day, I will have a little assignment posted for you, and you can scribble on a piece of paper for now. I'll have an assignment for you you can add that and upload it in Google Classroom. All right, so I'm going to change gears a little bit and go with the 7th grade stuff. Got my notes over here. And don't forget, for all grades, you can go to Quizlet, not Quizlet Live, but regular Quizlet, and look for anything that has my name on it, Suriani, which is, if I can get this to work here. There we go. That's how you spell my name, or for Mr. Fosnight, it's capital M-R, capital F-A-S-N-I-G-H-T. There is no period between the R and the F is capitalized. That'll bring up a lot of Quizlets and 8th graders. You should be doing forces in motion. Seventh graders, I believe there's one on plants. I'll keep you updated on that. I'm sure Mr. Fosnight is looking for that right now. Getting into what we're going to be doing in seventh graders. All right, Cheese Stick, thanks for joining us. We'll see you. Seventh graders, like I said, we've been talking about biomes and just briefly talked about the plants and animals that exist in each biome. And so what we're going to be doing is getting a little bit more specific about types of plants and how they fit and the different categories. I'm going to touch on a few that are on your assignment. One is vascular plants. Some of you may have heard the word vascular, trying to understand what vascular means. In humans, vascular basically is your system of veins and arteries and heart, and how that all functions together as one. As far as in plants, vascular system in plants it's basically the tubes that are in the stems of the plant, which helps the plant bring in water and nutrients that it needs and get rid of anything that it doesn't. And so there's, in a vascular plant, that's any plant that has these tubes that travel, there's two types. One is called xylem, and I'm going to type it in here. And the other one is called phloem, okay? And this is one of those things that everybody usually gets, but they often switch them, okay? And so xylem brings water and nutrients into a plant. They start in the roots, from the ground and the roots. They travel up through the plants all the way out into the leaves. The phloem is the opposite end. Phloem is getting rid of the waste and moving stuff around. So if there's too much water in one part of the plant, it can actually transport it to another part. It also helps getting rid of the waste. When we talked earlier in the year about the water system and how plants get rid of waste, we know that they get rid of oxygen is their waste that they get rid of actually through the leaves. This is partially, and moisture, when we put our bags on our trees and collected that moisture, this is how that happens. That water actually will travel through the phloem, water that the plant doesn't need and needs to get rid of. It'll travel through the phloem and exit the plant through the leaves. See how it's all connecting together, what we learned earlier in the year. There are two all right, I'll go over that again. It would help if your TV isn't blasting in the background. I turned mine off, and we'll go over some of that again. So there's two parts. Vascular plants basically are plants that have tubes, kind of like our veins and arteries in our body, but in plants they help the water and nutrients flow from the roots up into the tree and around the tree, and to help the tree or plant or flower, vegetable, it's all included in all of those. Get rid of those wastes. The xylem is where are the tubes where the water and nutrients actually comes into a plant. So xylem bring water and nutrients into the plant. Phloem help move water and nutrients around and helps a plant, that could be a tree or a plant, actually get rid of that waste. Okay, hopefully you got that. I do have the two terms in there, not the definition. but we'll be talking about that. It is on your assignment, kind of plants assignment. There are really two main categories of trees and possibly some shrubs. The one is called conifers. Okay, and I typed that in there. If you look at the prefix on that word, conifers, C-O-N, it actually comes from the idea that the plant has cones. So any sort of pine tree that gives off cones are where their seeds are. Those are called conifers. We think of conifers as being we call them evergreens, Christmas trees type of trees, blue spruce, arborvitaes. There's a whole variety of plants that stay green in the wintertime that are classified as conifers. If you look around, if you're driving around, or even if you look out the window, look for something that's still green. Chances are it's a conifer. There are some exceptions, such as hollies. I don't believe hollies are conifers. I made it 40 minutes without coughing. All right. The thing about conifers, that's how they spread themselves. That's how they release their seeds in the cone. We'll find those in mountainous regions. We'll find them all over the world, but they are very successful in mountainous regions, especially at higher altitudes. They'll survive where other plants won't. When we get into the north, if you watch any of the Alaska shows that are out, you'll see an abundance of conifers up there, up north. And so they're indigenous to areas like that. However, we have a lot around here too. The other type of trees that we have, and some of you came across this in your packets, or when you're doing your biome projects rather, is deciduous trees. And I'm trying to spell this right. There we go. Deciduous trees. And that's basically everything else. The trees that turn colors in the fall, lose their leaves, are kind of gray and ugly and dormant in the wintertime. And then in the springtime, what happens? They start to get buds, they start to get leaves on them again. So the trees that we know that grow and seem to grow in the summertime, get leaves, lose their leaves in the fall, go through that cycle of dormancy, and then in the springtime when it warms up and we have more sunlight. That's a deciduous tree. The majority of trees around us are considered deciduous. We got another visitor. Thank you. And those are the that's the other category of trees. We also, there's things like mosses. My next broadcast, I'll have examples of moss and lichen and how that plays into it. Flowering plants, ferns, there's a lot of different categories of plants. And remember, in the fall, we talked about how anything that's green produces oxygen. And so that's a good thing. And it also helps get rid of, I'm practicing good hygiene in front of you guys. It helps get rid of carbon out of the air. So let me refocus here. Got a little distracted. Things like that I was talking about, like mosses. Most of us have seen moss or lichen that grows on a tree. Those are non-vascular plants. They don't have those tubes running in them to allow water. They're also usually very small. They're not big plants. Again, I will be showing you guys examples of them. Some of them live in dark, wet places, so the water doesn't have to travel very far. And I know what I wanted to say, trees. And most of us who have seen a tree cut, we've talked about counting the rings on a tree. Actually, those rings that we see in the tree at one point, most of those are actually the xylem and phloem, and those are the tubes that bring water in and out. Right now, what we were talking about, we are with the 7th graders. We are talking about page 38 and 39 on your assignment. And if you look at some, I do want you to answer the check your understanding questions that are in there also. Some of the questions are, where do non-vascular plants live? What are vascular plants? I've already discussed how vascular plants have xylem and phloem in them. We are talking about different categories of plants like conifers, which are any sort of evergreen that basically stays green all year round. Most of those are conifers. And deciduous trees are the typical trees that we know, maples, oaks, ash, type of trees that lose their leaves in the fall. And let's talk about what don't you want to do? Let's talk about I lost my train of thought. Sorry. So we were talking about trees. Oh, let's talk about growing seasons. There are two parts to growing seasons with plants that are not conifers. One is temperature, the other is sunlight, the amount of sunlight. As we get closer to spring and summer, which spring is just a few days away, we will have an equal amount of sunlight and darkness in just a few days. And then once that passes, yeah, I understand that. I probably would, somebody posted that I would probably have more people if I was playing Minecraft. That may be true, but Minecraft for most of us isn't going to pay the bills. On a side note, the good thing about learning how to garden is you can make food for yourself. What's going on in the world today with us not even being able to come together, maybe that's a good thing, and that's a good skill that we all need to learn. And I love it. It's enjoyable for me. You guys will probably find out that you love it too, some of you. Better than playing Minecraft. And yeah, better than playing Roblox. Sorry. All right, so getting back to where we were, understanding where the check your understanding section, understanding what are vascular plants and the difference between vascular plants and non-vascular plants. Understand the difference to that. It's all in the reading. You only have basically a paragraph to read. Anything that's important is highlighted, and you guys got plenty of time. The other questions that are on there really have to do with strategies about you're comparing flowering plants to ferns and mosses, whether they have roots, whether they have seeds, whether they have a vascular system like xylem and phloem. And so that's something important that you need to pay attention to. On Quizlet for the 7th grade, we do have a life cycle Quizlet, and you pay attention to the words that are starred. And that's going to help you focus on what we need to focus. And some of us like Roblox over Minecraft. You guys are funny. It's kind of distracting to try to read that and look at the assignment too. Flowering plants, we all learned in elementary school how bees are pollinators. Actually, bees aren't the only thing that pollinate plants. Pretty much anything that flies can be a pollinator. And so it's important to understand that flowering plants have their own category. Some plants, you're all right. Some plants use their root systems to reproduce, and which we go back and touch on in 8th grade. So that being said, something like a fern, anything that's in the fern category actually has spores, and the spores just kind of fly off or drop off the fern, and that's one of the ways that it reproduces. We are going to be talking about what we need to do to germinate a seed. It's important to understand how to germinate seeds because we are going to be starting our gardens. I'll be starting one here at home. If we somehow don't get back to school, you'll be able to see the progress. We'll actually do it live, and you'll be able to see the progress, how quickly it grows. And so you'll be, if we get to do this in class, you'll be keeping a log, and so you can do this from home too. We can keep a log on its growth. I'll be measuring it, and we'll keep that data, and we'll be experimenting. We'll have some with that'll be fertilized and some that's unfertilized, so we can observe the difference between the two. And that'll be fun to do, and it's something that you can start at home. When we do germinate or start growing a seed, it really grows in two directions. It has a root system that starts growing down into the soil, and it has a stem system that starts growing up into out of the soil into the sky. Why? Because it needs sunlight to produce photosynthesis. One of your assignments that'll be posted will be understanding photosynthesis and how it plays a role. So we'll be doing that this week. Again, apologize that we're just getting up and started on all this, and we'll be throwing a lot of stuff at you guys online. Please get on and make sure that everything works for you. Make sure that you can get on and into the Google Classroom. If you are having trouble getting on anything, whether it's YouTube Live, whether it's Google Classroom, email somebody. We've given out lists of email addresses, and we'll work through that. I want to especially thank Ms. Vaughn for setting this up. She's worked really, really hard getting this set up, and I struggled with it. You guys, especially you 12, 13, 14-year-olders, you were born with technology. Us old guys didn't even have cell phones when we were kids. All right. If anybody has any questions, now would be a question and answer period before I log off. If we end up not having any questions, we'll probably end a little bit early, and we'll take it from there. In the meantime, I hope you guys are using good hygiene. Don't get too close to anybody. Even if you scratch your face or whatever, wash. Which class code are you looking for? Got a question for a class code. Offhand, I don't have that pulled up on my screen. I don't know if Ms. Vaughn or Mr. Fosnight has some class codes. That would be for 7th grade. We would need some 7th grade class codes. I don't know if I can pull it up on my home laptop here. I probably can't. Yeah, for Google Classroom, Mr. Fosnight. Hopefully he can pull that up real quick. We're just starting to get that set up. So as long as he can get into it, that's fine. And we'll be throwing some assignments in daily. You basically need to look at it every day. Yeah, I understand that. So we'll be posting stuff. I basically live in a paper world, and I have to get everything, either find it on the internet or load it up and get it inserted in there. And I apologize. All right, for the 7th grade, we have that code HKYAYTV. Thank you, Mr. Fosnight. Any other questions? I may have that set up that we post that that we post that first thing before the next live stream that we do, which I believe there's, I don't know if Miss Vaughn is on. If you are, do you know when the next live stream is? All right, it's time for me to get ready to have a cup of tea, soothe my throat. I'm not used to talking for a whole hour. Any other questions? Thanks, Harold, for helping us today, making sure everything's all right. All right, if there's, okay, Miss Bond isn't on right now. That's okay. We will talk to you soon. Mr. Fosnight says we need to have a closing song. I'll maybe work on watching an episode of Mr. Rogers so we can close with that next time. I don't know, Mr. Fosnight, if you can think of a Zeppelin song that we could close with. I don't know. All right. Thanks, everybody, for being patient and watching me stumble through this. And until next time, have a good day. If you guys have any questions, don't forget to email any of us. It's usually our first name dot last name at summitacademies.org. So any of us, if you know how to spell our names, you're in good shape. It is not Siranagi, by the way. It's Sirianni, Sirianni. All right, guys. Don't leave. Mrs. Yingling is getting some information, so we're going to hold on for a minute. And I don't know. Give me a second. I'll find something that we can listen to. And by the way, thank God I have my phone on mute, because I've gotten calls and texts this whole time while we're doing this. And let's see. Yep, next live stream is scheduled for 5 pending, no computer issues, and that's going to be it. It will be with Miss Holden. And since I'm a Who fan, I'm going to end with the Who. Since there's so much news about the World Health Organization, I told my wife this morning that there's 2 people from the WHO that got infected with the coronavirus. She thought I was talking about the rock band. I was talking about the World Health Organization. So be safe. You like that, Mr. Foss Knight? Okay, air drums, everybody. Peace out.